Thank you for joining us on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. And here's your host, Chris Cebollero.
Well, once again, it's time for the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. I got to tell you, we've got such a great topic today. And when we think about the responsibility of you as a leader and your responsibilities within the organization, it's paramount that we make every effort to ensure that we have a cohesive alignment with members of our own leadership team. You know, it seems that when I go into organizations, one of the biggest problems that I find is that there's a disconnect between the top leader and members of his own leadership team. And, you know, one of the things that I try to help them with is how does this disconnect happen? And what are the secrets for developing a progressive alignment with members of your team? Well, I got to tell you, man, I'm very excited to chat with today's guest because she's going to go ahead and give us the secrets that is going to make this alignment and develop this cohesive team. Jen Roberts is the president and founder of Difference Consulting, a company specializing in helping companies build, develop, and leverage the unique talents of their own people and teams internally through strategic consulting, executive coaching, and proprietary leadership development programs. She is a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. She's an accomplished author. And go ahead and check out her stuff. You can find them on such websites as Forbes, the Association for Talent Development. Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you all the way from the great state of Georgia, Jen Roberts. Jen, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, Chris. How are you?
Man, I am awesome, and I'm so excited to chat with you today. You know, one of the things that I think is, you know, really important as we think about the work that we do, when we go into organizations, you know, they're looking to us, you know, for our expertise of how they could become better in doing their job. And part of that is working with their workforce and developing employee engagement. But sometimes we see this disconnect between the leader and members of his own management team. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you, I guess as a first question, do you have any sense of why this disconnect happens?
You know, you're absolutely right. Leaders want to have clear strategic alignment with their management teams, and they think that they have clear enough communication to make that happen, to drive the workplace culture, to drive the productivity on their teams. But so many of these teams really struggle with making that alignment a reality. And one of the big reasons that I think that happens is because leaders assume that they're communicating so clearly with their teams and that everybody's on the same page. And what they find is that the interpretation of those messages, the interpretation of the key vision of the organization, of the mission of the department, isn't necessarily flowing as easily as they wanted it to from one member to the other.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you bring up. I mean, you know, when we, you know, I guess it's easier if you come in as a new leader, you know, but if you've been an old hat, if you've been a leader for a long time and you've had the same members of your team, the assumption is that everybody's on the same page. But in actuality, that's probably not true. And then that starts the domino effect that affects the workforce and, you know, basically their engagement, satisfaction, and their productivity.
You're 100% right. You know, when a management team is aligned in terms of their communication and their decision-making processes, and that group is modeling their core values and working towards a common vision and purpose, it is a beautiful thing. They can really create some very positive aspects in the work environment, and it leads to greater trust and greater respect and productivity within the team. But when they're not aligned, all sorts of problems can happen.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great setup for my next question, because what I was going to, you know, tag you with next is when this relationship is out of alignment, what are some of the problems that we can expect to encounter within our organization?
I think one of the biggest issues initially is just that it creates confusion amongst the ranks in the organization. So when you go to any member of the management team, an employee expects to get consistent information regardless of who they approach. And when a management team isn't aligned, it creates a lot of confusion for those employees when they get different answers, or if they get different directives, or if you have one leader that has a very different agenda. So what happens is it can actually paralyze the productivity of the organization because people don't know what to do and they don't want to make mistakes. So they end up just not doing anything, or they don't do their work as effectively as they could if the team were clearly aligned.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, because that's one of the things that information now gets passed down, you know, through the grapevine almost. So if I'm a leader and you're a leader and we're given two different messages, now that the people that we're talking to are starting to carry those messages on our behalf. So I could see where that confusion would happen. But when we think about other problems, I mean, what else can we expect?
One of the biggest things that happens is that there's a lot of unnecessary work on the part of the employees because they might be duplicating the efforts of other people on the team, or they may have to do something again because the directive wasn't clear or it wasn't aligned to what the leader was expecting. So it really leads to a lot of unnecessary effort, which can become really frustrating for employees. It can create a lot of disengagement, both at the employee level and for the management team, because when managers feel like they're giving effective information and they're passing those directives and those intentions along, and then it ends up getting challenged at a higher level, or if employees are having to redo work and they're becoming very frustrated, it just really impacts morale in a negative way across the board.
And I think you bring up a really, really important point here. When we think about, employee satisfaction, or we think about employee engagement, I was very, very surprised to see that the Gallup organization, who's one of the preeminent, leaders in employee engagement, they were saying that almost 71% of our workforce is either disengaged or actively disengaged. So when we talk about this disengagement and our workforce that is really the success of our organization, it could be that this misalignment is causing this disengagement with the workforce.
It absolutely contributes to it, and you're correct about those statistics. They're staggering statistics. When you think about how many people get up and go to work each day, you want to create an environment as a leader where people feel like they're contributing meaningful work and they're doing something that matters and that it's really tied to a common purpose, and you have that vision that's really driving excellent work on the part of both the management team and the employees. And it really does begin to break down engagement when this alignment isn't the way that it needs to be. Another problem that can actually happen too is that over time, when a leadership team isn't aligned and you're getting different pieces of information from different managers on the team, it can really create some damage to that leader's credibility when their decisions are overturned or are questioned by other members of the management team. And that can end up also creating a problem with the employees not knowing whether to trust the directives that their managers are giving them. And you can imagine what a big impact that can have both on morale and on engagement when you don't trust what your leader is telling you to do.
And actually, I was going to bring that up to talk about that leadership credibility, and I think that that's really an important factor. One of the things here that may not even be your credibility issue, as so if you're my leader and we have a little bit of misalignment, now I'm going to talk to the workforce to say, well, he's changed his mind again. The damage to credibility may not be to me as the supervisor, but may be to you as the manager or director. So I think we've got to remember that as well, that it could be damaging credibility at all levels, or it could even skip a level and go right to the top and say, I'm working for a guy that doesn't know what the heck he's doing.
Right. And that's definitely not what anybody aspires to as they move into a leadership position. I think all of us can agree that as leaders, we want to be able to create organizations where we're motivating and inspiring employees, and we're really creating that environment that leads to the trust and collaboration that produces the best results. And it really can become very damaging to skip over some key steps that will help those leaders create better alignment within their team to build that trusting and respectful organization.
So I think that was a great transition. So when we talk about developing alignment with our own management team, how important is it to build buy-in or create a common vision to the success of what you're trying to accomplish?
Creating that common core values and vision and mission are absolutely critical to the success of any organization. And you would be surprised to learn how many companies and departments and leadership teams don't have that common vision and mission that they're working against. One of the key steps that leaders can really do to build greater alignment within their management team is to create or build buy-in to a common vision or purpose. You would be surprised at how many companies and departments and leadership teams operate without a central focus on their core values, on their core goals, and having a centralized purpose that they're working towards. So if your company has established core values and a vision statement, that is terrific. Make sure that you review it with your team. It's more than just having something up on your website or having a few behaviors listed on a poster in the wall somewhere. So make sure that if nothing exists, that you sit down and really take the time to co-create that vision with your leadership team, and remembering that it starts with the buy-in of the top leaders. So for employees to be engaged, everybody really needs to understand how what they do on a daily basis contributes to the overall strategic objectives of the company. So if that isn't crystal clear in everything that you do within your management team, some of those problems that we talked about earlier will begin to surface.
And I got to tell you, Ben, and I don't want to gloss over this because I think, in my opinion, the vision statement is the most important component of an organization. And I read a good book one time that said, where there is no vision, people will perish. As individuals, we are wired to think in pictures. If I say, think about your car, you don't see the letters CAR, you actually see a picture of your car. If I say, picture your front door, you don't see the letters DOOR, you actually see your front door. So in the absence of a vision, how do our people know where they're supposed to go? I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I think you touch on a lot of key points here, that the vision statement, and especially building that with your leadership team and even inviting some of the workforce to the table to help build that vision is something that's really important. One of the things that I like to do when I'm speaking is I'll ask the leaders, how many of you in your organization have a vision statement? And very proudly, you see these hands go up. Well, my next comment really puts them down quickly when I say, who can come up here and recite it for me? Well,
Right.
if the leaders don't know the vision statement of the organization, why does the workforce need to know? And that's really an important component to the success of the organization, I would think.
And you're absolutely right. I think people sit down and they endeavor to write these statements and they get published somewhere and then they're shelved. And nobody really ever goes back and looks at them and tries to integrate them into the day-to-day operations of their business. And that's where leaders who are doing this above and beyond the rest really excel, is that they're not only writing them down and co-creating them, which is a magical step in and of itself, but they're actually living it in all of their procedures and all of their policies and how they hire people and how they communicate with their teams. Everything becomes centralized around why. Why do we even exist as a company? What is it that we do and are trying to do for the people that we serve? And when you have that clear vision, it makes everything else so easy.
For the people out there who are listening, if there's a piece of advice that I think you can take from this show, is that if you don't know what your vision statement is, throw it away. And then invite people to the table, create a new one, get members of your workforce, create a new one. Maybe you make 3 or 4 of them, send them out to your organization, let them vote on the one they want, and then build a campaign around that vision, and then watch the success happen. But Jen, let's go ahead and talk back to alignment. So when we think about our leadership ability, how vital is it for us to be transparent and communicate with our team really almost on a daily basis?
Communicating with your team is absolutely critical. So just like we talked about the importance of having those leaders actually come to the table and co-create the vision so that they have the buy-in, so that they have some skin in the game that they are going to be playing every day, being transparent in your communications and really talking to them regularly is a key step. So it's really important to keep your management team in the loop as much as possible. Make sure that those communication channels are very open, because nobody likes being blindsided by a third party. So when leaders have questions or when new actions are being taken on the management team, make sure to really build the buy-in with the management level first so that they can help reinforce those key messages down the line when employees ask questions and be able to provide those consistent messages.
I think that goes back, like you said, to that confusion. And if everybody's on the same page and they know exactly the reason why something is happening, and, one of the other things is when we talk about being transparent to our team, do you have a sense of how important that is to be just as transparent with the workforce?
Transparency to me is one of the most important elements of communication, because when people understand what they're trying to do, why it's important, how the work that they're doing on a daily basis really helps the company be able to succeed and do what it does, then everybody functions better. So when there are question marks or people don't know what's happening, they have a tendency to fill in those questions with the worst case scenario. And it's hard for people sometimes to get motivated to take action when they're not sure why something's happening. So transparency throughout the organization to me is one of the most important pieces.
Jen, as we discuss, in building this alignment, I think one of the things that I see when I go into organizations a lot is I start to talk about roles and I start to talk about responsibilities. And, you're always sent to go see this person or, oh, that's not my end of the operation. Go ahead and see Jim. Jim handles all that stuff. But I guess my question to you is, how important is it to outline the roles and responsibilities of the members of your team?
I think when it comes to building greater alignment within your management team, it's very important to make sure that the roles and responsibilities are clearly defined, and more importantly, that you're honoring them. So this goes beyond just merely writing the job description, but it's really more about honoring the position. So when you're gaining that alignment with your management team, it's about agreeing on what is their decision space, what is the authority that they have, the ability to make decisions around. What are the clear channels of communication that are important to being able to define the things that you want to be able to communicate within your organization? So, managers and leaders are often really well-intentioned, and if somebody comes to them with a problem, they want to be able to solve it right away, so they'll often jump in and provide feedback or provide a solution that may actually not be in alignment with what their manager would have told them to do, and that goes back to creating the confusion. So what they unintentionally do as a result of that is they undermine their manager's credibility. They undermine their authority by answering those questions. So it's really important to be able to redirect employees back to the appropriate people and encourage direct communication with those managers. So that shows not only that you trust your managers to make decisions and execute against the common vision and purpose that you've already set, but it also engenders greater respect and provides consistency to all of your employees, regardless of the management level that they approach.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I think that was a really excellent answer. I think I want to follow on with this, though. As we now start to outline these roles and responsibilities, do you have a sense of how do we keep those roles and responsibilities from becoming siloed within the organization? That's my area of responsibility. I don't want you treading there. I think that could always cause a challenge with not only you as the leader, but with also peers in that leadership team.
You're absolutely right about that, too. I think having those open channels of communication where not only does the leader have his or her own vision about how this organization should be operating, but having the managers have a greater sense of awareness of not only their own area, but also others' areas of responsibility, and kind of building shared alignment and agreement to the decision space collectively as a team is really important in helping those leaders support one another as they're leading their teams.
Yeah, I really like that. Let me ask you a question, Jen. Let's say I'm a leader, and let's say I'm living in the fantasy world of that I have an aligned team. Is there something that I can do to kind of test this hypothesis that my leaders are aligned with me? Or how do I figure that may even be a problem within my organization?
You can bring your management team around the table and do something like what you recommended earlier by asking if they know what the vision statement is, just seeing where people are in their own interpretation of your company's vision and mission. And if it seems that there's misalignment, then it might be a time to call in someone like myself or a member of my team to really help your management team reach greater alignment and create new statements that more accurately support the culture that you're trying to drive within your organization.
I think that's really important because when we talk about culture, it really is the behavior of the organization. I mean, we have a vision statement. We know where we want to go. We have plans. We have strategies to get to that vision. The culture is the behavior of the organization as we take those steps. And I got to think that as we're now thinking about the alignment of our team and, if we're creating or reading off the same sheet of music, if any of those things are out of alignment with the workforce, with the leadership team, we may not have a healthy organization. And I think that we've got to really kind of pay attention to those signals. But a lot of times, me as the top leader, as well as members of my team, we're not engaging very well with the members of the workforce to even figure that out. And I got to think that that's really a hurdle for any organization that wants to become successful.
Yeah, you're 100% on target there. All of those things can be sort of the evidence that something is misaligned. And then taking the effort to really sit down and think about why we're operating the way that we are and what we can do to create those more strategic and intentional goals for the organization. And the types of behaviors that we want to be able to drive within the culture need to be emulated by the leadership team first and foremost. So making sure that all the leaders are on the same page and working toward that common vision and purpose is super important.
So Jen, I think we've covered a lot of great information. And if there's folks out there that are listening that may be thinking that, maybe my leadership team isn't in alignment and they want to get in touch with you and engage with you, what's the best way they can do that?
We would love to talk with you. Please just reach out to us through our website, differenceconsulting.com, and schedule a complimentary discovery call, which is our initial step in really helping to put you on the right path. So we'll sit down and schedule some time to really talk about your needs and what might be working and not working as well as you'd like it to, so that we can go from there.
I got to tell you, Jen, I've had a great time with you visiting here, and there's a lot more things I'd love to talk to you about. So please promise us you'll come back.
Absolutely. That would be terrific. Thank you so much.
I got to tell you, I learned a lot. I took some notes here, and I don't know why I take notes during these shows because I record them, but I sit here and I always make notes when the guest has something great to say. But for everybody out there, I want to thank you for joining us again on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. Go ahead and take an inventory of your leadership team. Make the determination, are you aligned with your leaders? If you're not aligned with your leaders, they're not aligned with the workforce. If the workforce isn't aligned, you have to worry about disengagement, you have to worry about poor customer or client experiences, and your organization is not going to be successful. So I want to thank you again for joining us. I want to thank Jen Roberts for being our special guest today. And until next time, I'm Chris Cebollero, and I'll chat with you again real soon.
Thank you for joining us. The Ultimate Leadership Podcast is a production of chriscebollero.com. You can interact with us by email at ultimateleadership16@gmail.com. All rights reserved.